Sandra Bullock sat alone in a quiet corner of the small café, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup that had already lost its heat. The evening outside was slow and gentle, but inside her chest everything felt heavy and rushed. She had been smiling in front of cameras for weeks, forcing energy she did not have, hiding fears she never said to anyone. Tonight she tried to catch a break, just a moment of peace, but the more she tried to calm her mind, the louder it became. Something inside her felt like it was collapsing quietly, and she did not know how long she could hold it together. Then it happened. The door of the cafe opened with a soft sound, and a familiar figure stepped inside, scanning the room with calm eyes. Keanu Reeves. He looked like someone who carried storms inside him but never allowed them to hurt anyone. His presence alone had a strange power. People naturally felt safe around him even before he spoke a word. Sandra noticed him instantly, but she quickly looked away. She did not want him to see her like this. She did not want anyone to see her like this. Keanu noticed her anyway. He walked quietly toward her table, his steps soft but steady. When he reached her, he gently said her name in a calm voice that carried understanding instead of questions. The moment she heard him, her heart tightened. She forced a small smile, but she knew it looked weak. Keanu pulled a chair and sat across from her without asking, but the way he did it felt respectful, like he was giving her space instead of taking it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe lights glowed softly above, warm and comforting. Two students whispered at the far end, a couple laughed near the counter, and soft music played on a small speaker. Everything outside Sandra's thoughts felt peaceful, but inside she felt a storm she could no longer hide. Keanu studied her face for a long second, not in a judging way, but in a way that showed he genuinely cared. He saw the tiredness around her eyes. He saw how her breathing felt unsteady. He saw how her hands kept tightening around the cup, as if she was trying to hold herself together. "You look like you needed some space," Keanu finally said, his voice low and gentle. Sandra nodded. She tried to speak, but her voice stayed stuck in her throat. She looked down at the table, hoping the silence would hide the truth, but Keanu already knew something was wrong. He leaned slightly forward, not pushing her, not demanding anything, just showing he was there. The cafe door opened again, and suddenly a group of people walked in. They were loud, laughing, and carrying bags from a nearby event. They filled the space with noise, excitement, and a kind of chaos that Sandra was trying to escape. Her shoulders stiffened instantly. The noise grew louder. Someone recognized Keanu from a distance, whispering excitedly. Cameras were always close when someone like him appeared, and Sandra knew what would come next. Her heart began to race. She tried to pretend she was fine, but Keanu saw her panic rise. Without saying a word, he stood up and walked toward the counter. Sandra watched with confusion and slight fear because she had no idea what he was doing. He spoke to the staff quietly, pointing toward her side of the cafe. The staff nodded and opened a small door near the back. Keanu returned and said softly, "Come with me, you need quiet." She hesitated for a moment, but something in his calm expression gave her confidence she thought she had lost. She followed him to the back of the cafe where a private room waited. It was small and cozy, with 2 chairs, dim lights, and a window that showed the soft evening sky. Once they sat, the quietness wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Sandra breathed out slowly, feeling her heartbeat settle inch by inch. The silence in the room was different from the silence she felt earlier. This one felt safe. This one felt like she was finally allowed to stop pretending. Keanu did not rush her. He simply sat across from her, giving her time to settle, giving her space to gather her thoughts. He knew she was struggling, but he also knew forcing her to talk would break the fragile calm she had found. After a long, quiet moment, Sandra finally spoke with a shaky voice. "I don't know what is happening to me," she whispered. Keanu listened closely. "Everything feels heavy. The work, the pressure, the expectations. I feel like I'm losing control of everything, and I can't tell anyone because they expect me to be strong. They want me to be perfect, and I'm just tired, Keanu, really tired." Her voice trembled on the last words. She felt embarrassed for admitting so much. She was used to being the strong one, the cheerful one, the one who smiled through anything. But tonight she could not pretend, not in front of someone who saw the truth so quickly. Keanu nodded slowly. "You don't have to be perfect for anyone," he said softly. "You don't even have to be perfect for yourself. You just need to be honest with how you feel." Sandra looked at him with watery eyes. She had so many moments where she thought about giving up, not on her work, not on her life, but on the pressure of being flawless. She wanted to rest. She wanted to breathe. She wanted to be human for once. But the world rarely allowed that. As she was about to speak again, the lights in the cafe flickered. A staff member rushed to the door and informed them that the power system was unstable due to an issue outside. They were closing early for safety. Sandra felt her chest tighten again. If they closed now, they would have to go through the back alley, and she could already hear growing noise from the front. Her tired face, puffy eyes, and vulnerable expression would end up in someone's camera. She could not handle that tonight. Keanu stood up instantly. He gave her a quick, reassuring look. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'll handle it." He guided her toward the back exit. He kept his steps slow so she did not feel rushed. The cafe staff opened the door carefully, making sure no one outside noticed. Sandra felt a tiny relief. Keanu's presence made her feel safer than she had felt in weeks. They stepped into a narrow alley with soft, yellow streetlights above them. The air was cool, carrying a gentle breeze that touched her face. Keanu looked around to make sure the area was clear. Then he turned to her. "You're okay," he said quietly. "Just breathe." Sandra took a slow breath, feeling the cold air settle in her lungs. For the first time in a long while, she felt her mind slow down. She felt grounded. She felt seen. Keanu reached into the small paper bag the cafe staff handed him earlier. He pulled out 2 takeaway coffee cups. He offered one to her with a small, gentle smile. "They made these before closing," he said. "I thought you might like it." Sandra looked at the cup, then at him. That simple act, that small, thoughtful gesture, reached deeper than she expected. She felt warmth rise inside her chest, not from the drink but from the kindness behind it. "Thank you," she whispered. The two of them walked toward a quiet bench outside the alley. The night around them felt peaceful. No cameras, no noise. Just 2 friends sitting together, holding warm cups, sharing the kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. As Sandra took her first sip, she felt a slight tremble inside her calm. But this tremble was not fear. It was relief. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could simply exist without pretending. She felt like she could rest. She felt like she could breathe again. And deep down, she knew this moment happened because Keanu noticed what no one else did. The night air around the small alley felt calm, almost healing, but something inside Sandra still trembled softly, like a quiet echo of everything she had been carrying for weeks. She held the warm cup in her hands and stared at the gentle steam rising from it. For a moment she felt peaceful, but the peace was fragile, like a thin layer of ice that could break with a single thought. Keanu sat beside her, silent but present, giving her space to feel everything without needing to explain too much. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came only from trust. Keanu knew she was not ready to talk, and Sandra knew he would wait as long as she needed. The cool breeze touched their faces, carrying the soft smell of freshly brewed coffee from the cafe behind them. Sandra finally took a slow sip and let the warm liquid calm her nerves. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed out gently. Keanu watched her with quiet attention. He noticed her shoulders relaxing just a little. He noticed the tension around her eyes begin to soften. Small details that most people would miss, but he did not. "You don't have to say anything until you want to," he said softly. Sandra nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. But even as she tried to enjoy the peace, a fear lingered underneath her calm. She knew that once she spoke the truth, once she let the words leave her heart, everything would become real. She was scared of that reality, scared of admitting how close she felt to breaking. Finally, she looked at Keanu with tired eyes. "I think I'm losing myself," she said quietly. Keanu listened without blinking, without interrupting. She continued, her voice trembling. "I've been working nonstop. People expect so much from me. Everyone keeps saying I'm doing great, that I'm handling everything well. But they don't see how hard it is to wake up every day and pretend I'm okay. I'm afraid of disappointing everyone. I'm afraid someone will notice I'm not as strong as they think." Her voice cracked. She swallowed, trying to control her emotions. "And now I feel like one small thing might push me over the edge." Keanu's face remained calm, but his eyes softened with understanding. He leaned forward just enough to show he was fully there with her. "Sandra," he said gently, "you are human. You are allowed to feel tired. You are allowed to struggle." She looked away, blinking back tears. "But I'm supposed to be strong," she whispered. "Strength doesn't mean pretending," Keanu replied. "It means facing what you feel even when it's uncomfortable." She breathed deeply, letting his words settle inside her. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. People admired her, praised her, pushed her, expected perfection, but they rarely saw her humanity. For a moment the night remained peaceful. Then a sudden sound broke the calm. A faint rustling noise came from the end of the alley. Sandra flinched slightly. Keanu instantly turned his head, alert but composed. Two shadows moved near the corner. Someone whispered softly, and a clicking sound followed. Sandra's heart jumped. She feared it was someone with a camera. She could not handle her vulnerable state being captured tonight. Keanu stood up slowly, placing his coffee cup on the bench. His body language remained calm, but there was a protective energy around him. He took a few steps forward, positioning himself between Sandra and the alley entrance. A moment later, two teenagers appeared, each holding their phones. Their eyes widened when they saw Keanu. One of them whispered excitedly, "That's him!" But they hesitated when they noticed Sandra sitting in the dim light, looking exhausted. Keanu raised a gentle hand, not aggressive but firm enough to send a message. "Not tonight," he said softly. The teenagers looked at each other. They were not harmful, just curious. But something in Keanu's calm voice made them respect his request instantly. They nodded, turned away, and disappeared back into the street. Sandra felt relief wash through her. Keanu returned to the bench and sat down again. He did not say anything about what had just happened. He did not try to make her feel weak or embarrassed for being scared. He simply said, "You're safe." Those two words carried more comfort than anything she had heard in weeks. She breathed slowly again and held the cup close to her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Keanu looked at her with confusion. For what? For being a mess right now. He shook his head gently. "You're not a mess, you're just tired. There's nothing wrong with that." Her eyes softened again. The honesty in his words felt like a soft light in a dark room. "You know," Keanu continued, "I've had days where I felt exactly like you do. Days where I felt like disappearing just to escape the pressure." Sandra stared at him silently. She had always known him as calm, grounded, almost unshakable. To hear him admit something so personal surprised her. "But the thing that helped me," he said, "was talking to the right person, not someone who wanted answers, someone who wanted me to feel understood." Sandra felt warmth in her chest. She whispered softly, "I'm glad you came tonight." Keanu smiled gently. "I didn't come here on purpose. I was just passing by, but something told me to check the cafe. Maybe this moment was meant to happen." Sandra looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I wish I could just pause life for a while," she said. "Just stop everything and breathe." "You can," Keanu replied. "You just did right here." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Sandra felt her eyes warming again. She tried to hide it, but a tear slipped quietly down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, but Keanu saw it. He did not react with shock or pity. He did not make her feel ashamed. He simply leaned closer and spoke softly. "It's okay to let yourself feel." The wind grew slightly colder. Sandra folded her arms and shivered. Keanu noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She tried to refuse. "No, I'm fine," she protested weakly. "You're cold," he said gently. "Keep it on." She finally accepted it. The warmth of the jacket felt like a quiet shield against the night. She stared at him with a soft expression. "You always do this," she said. "Do what?" he asked. "You always know when someone needs help, even when they don't say a word." Keanu smiled softly. "Maybe I just pay attention." They sat quietly again. The streetlights above cast long shadows across the ground, and the distant sound of traffic hummed like a soft heartbeat. Sandra felt the tension inside her slowly melt. The pressure, the fear, the exhaustion, they were still there, but they no longer felt impossible to face. But just as she began to feel calmer, her phone buzzed suddenly. She hesitated before checking it. When she looked at the screen, her heart dropped. Her director had sent a message, a long message, the kind that came only when something went wrong. Sandra froze. Keanu noticed her expression twist with fear. "What is it?" he asked gently. She handed him the phone with trembling hands. Keanu read the message silently. The words were harsh. The director complained about her performance, her lack of focus, her delays. He threatened to replace her if she did not improve immediately. Sandra felt tears rising again. "I knew it," she whispered weakly. "I'm failing." Keanu shook his head. This is not failure, this is pressure speaking through someone else's frustration. But what if he replaces me? She asked, her voice cracking. Keanu looked at her with a deep calm. Sandra, listen to me, he said softly. You are stronger than you think, you are talented, you are respected. One message cannot erase years of hard work, you will not fall because of this. She breathed shakily. It feels like everything is slipping away. Keanu reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was soft, steady, and filled with reassurance. You're not alone, he said quietly. And you're not slipping, you just need rest, and I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. A tear slid down her cheek again, but this time she did not hide it. The night around them grew quieter, as if the world paused to give her space to feel. For the first time in a long while, Sandra allowed herself to break a little, trusting that someone was there to help her rise again. The night around them had grown deeper, and the soft streetlights cast a golden glow on the alley walls. Sandra held the phone tightly in her hand, her heart still aching from the director's harsh message. Even though she tried to breathe steadily, her chest felt heavy, as if every breath carried a weight she was too tired to hold. Keanu stayed beside her, quiet but alert, watching her with calm eyes that did not judge, did not push, only supported. For a while, neither of them spoke. Sandra looked down, her eyelashes wet from tears she tried to hide. She felt embarrassed, exposed, and fragile in a way she had not felt in years. But she also felt understood, and that contrast confused her more than anything. Finally, she whispered, "Why does it hurt so much?" Keanu leaned forward slightly. "Because you care," he said softly. "Only people who care deeply feel pressure this strongly." She shook her head slowly. "I thought I could handle anything, but everything feels unstable now. The director is angry, the crew is stressed, and I'm scared I might be the reason." Keanu took a quiet breath before speaking. "Sandra, you are not the reason. You are a person who has been carrying too much alone. Anyone would break under this weight." She looked at him with tired eyes. "But what if I am the problem? What if I'm not good enough anymore?" Keanu held her gaze. "Then explain to me why millions of people admire you. Explain why people feel comfort just watching you act. Explain why the entire industry still talks about your kindness and strength." She looked away again, her throat tightening. She wanted to believe him, but her fear kept pulling her down. Keanu continued, his voice low and gentle. "People like us often think silence is strength. We push ourselves, we pretend to be fine, and we keep walking even when we are breaking inside. But real strength is knowing when to slow down." Sandra closed her eyes briefly. His words felt like a soft light reaching places inside her she had ignored for too long. But before she could respond, a sudden vibration came from her phone again. Her heart jumped. She feared it was another message from the director, maybe worse than before. Her hands shook slightly as she checked the screen. Her assistant had sent a voice note. Sandra hesitated, afraid of what she might hear. Keanu noticed her fear and gently said, "Play it, I'm here." She pressed the audio. Her assistant's voice came through, shaky and rushed. "Sandra, I don't know if you saw the director's message, but something happened at the studio after you left. The lighting system malfunctioned again. One of the crew members got hurt. The director is emotional and stressed, and he blamed everyone. He should not have sent you that message. Please don't take it personally. Things are out of control here." The message ended. Sandra stared at the phone with wide eyes. She imagined the scene clearly. Lights falling, chaos spreading, people shouting, the director losing control. Her heart tightened even more, but this time not out of guilt. She whispered, "I had no idea someone got hurt." Keanu nodded slowly. Pressure affects everyone, especially when things go wrong. "But he still blamed me," she said softly. "Because you were the easiest target in his frustration," Keanu replied. "Not because you deserved it." Sandra took a long, shaky breath. For a moment, the anger inside her mixed with sadness. She felt injustice, exhaustion, and fear all at once. She pressed her hands against her face and whispered, "I don't know how to handle this anymore." Keanu gently lowered her hands from her face. "You don't have to handle it alone," he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. The air around them felt cold again. Sandra wrapped his jacket tighter around her shoulders. Keanu leaned back against the bench and stared at the empty street. The silence grew heavy, but instead of feeling crushing, it felt thoughtful, as if both of them were searching for answers in the quiet. After a long moment, Sandra finally asked, Keanu, how do you stay so calm? How do you manage pressure without falling apart? He took a breath before answering. I don't always stay calm, he said quietly. I've had days where the world felt unbearable, days where I felt like I was walking alone, even in crowded rooms. I used to blame myself for everything that went wrong around me. It took me years to understand that people's anger often comes from their own battles, not ours. Sandra listened closely, surprised by how deeply his words connected with her own feelings. But what helped me, Keanu continued, was realizing that peace is something you build, not something that just appears. I learned to slow down even for a few minutes. I learned to breathe. I learned to observe instead of react, and I learned that asking for help is not weakness. Sandra lowered her eyes. I'm not good at asking for help. Most strong people aren't, he said. She looked at him again, and this time her expression softened. Why are you always so wise? She asked with a small, tired smile. Keanu smiled too, a gentle, warm smile. Maybe I've lived long enough to learn from all my mistakes. Her smile grew a little more real. The street was silent for a moment. Then a soft sound echoed from the cafe's back door as a staff member stepped out to lock it. Sandra watched as the lights inside slowly faded. She felt strangely sad watching it close, as if the calm moment inside that cafe earlier had been the last bit of normalcy she had before facing her fears. Keanu, she whispered, what if everything falls apart tomorrow? What if I can't keep up? Then tomorrow we deal with it together, he said gently. She felt something shift inside her chest. A soft warmth replaced the fear for a moment. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked quietly. Keanu's expression became thoughtful. Because I know how it feels when the world becomes too heavy, and because you have always been kind to others. Sometimes the kindest people forget they deserve kindness too. Those words hit her like a soft but powerful wave. She lowered her head, blinking slowly to hold back more tears. After a moment she whispered, I'm scared, Keanu. He nodded slowly, I know. I'm scared of failing. You won't, he said with quiet confidence. She looked at him, searching for something in his eyes. How do you know? She asked. Keanu leaned slightly closer. Because you're already standing after everything. You might feel weak, but you are still here. That is strength. A tear escaped her eye again, but she did not wipe it. She let it fall. Keanu did not move to stop her. He let her feel everything she had been holding inside. Sometimes silence was the best comfort. The night grew colder. A faint fog formed above the street. Distant cars moved slowly, their lights passing like soft reflections on wet pavement. Sandra felt the world quiet around her, as if nature itself was giving her time to breathe. Suddenly, a soft buzzing sound came from Keanu's pocket. He took out his phone, glanced at the screen, and frowned slightly. Sandra noticed it immediately. Is everything okay? She asked. Keanu hesitated before answering. There's a meeting I was supposed to attend tonight, an important one. Sandra's heart dropped a little. You should have gone, she whispered. He shook his head. No, this moment matters more. She stared at him, shocked. But that meeting, wasn't it something you were preparing for all week? Yes, he said calmly. And you skipped it. Yes, he repeated, softer this time. Sandra felt her breath freeze. She whispered, for me. Keanu smiled gently, for someone who needed a break. Her eyes filled instantly. She felt her chest tighten with emotion she could not describe. Keanu, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He looked at her with a calm, steady gaze. You matter too, he said. The world around them felt still. The night felt softer. The fear inside her slowly lost its power. She felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The night seemed deeper now, as if the darkness around them had thickened but softened at the same time. Sandra sat quietly, letting Keanu's words settle inside her like warm light sinking into a cold room. Something inside her felt lighter, but another part still carried the weight of everything she had faced that week. She held the coffee cup tightly, even though it had gone cold. She needed the comfort of holding something steady. Keanu stayed beside her, his calm presence filling the quiet alley. He looked relaxed, but Sandra could sense that he was still alert. He noticed every small change around them, every noise, every movement. He wasn't trying to protect her like she was fragile, but he was making sure nothing made her situation worse. That quiet awareness was something she had always admired about him. For a long moment, Sandra kept staring at the ground. Then she whispered, "I don't know what tomorrow will look like. I'm terrified of going back to the studio." Keanu nodded slowly. "Fear comes from imagining the worst, but you don't have to face tomorrow yet. Tonight is still here." She breathed in deeply. "I feel like everything around me is collapsing. The mistakes at the studio, the pressure, the expectations. I wasn't ready for any of it." "You don't have to be ready all the time," Keanu said gently. "No one is." Sandra looked at him with tired eyes. "But I've always been the person who stays in control. I'm the one people rely on. I'm not used to asking for comfort." "Maybe life is teaching you that you don't have to carry everything alone," he said. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the truth of his words sink in. She had spent years building a reputation for being strong, cheerful, always ready to handle anything. But inside, she had weaknesses, fears, and doubts she never admitted. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the alley, making Sandra shiver. Keanu noticed it instantly and gently shifted closer, blocking some of the wind. "We should get you somewhere warmer," he said softly. "I don't want to go home yet," she whispered. "I don't want to be alone." Keanu nodded with understanding instead of surprise. "We can stay here a little longer." The streetlights flickered above them, glowing softly. Sandra opened her eyes and looked at the quiet city around them. Everything seemed calm, but her thoughts whispered questions she didn't want to confront. "Keanu," she said after a long pause, "am I being dramatic? Maybe I'm just overreacting." He shook his head. "Your feelings are real, they matter. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks." She rubbed her hands slowly. "The director is going to be furious tomorrow." "The director is stressed and emotional. He reacted without thinking. That doesn't mean you have to carry all the blame." Sandra frowned slightly. "But what if he really replaces me?" Keanu leaned forward and looked directly into her eyes. "Then that would be his mistake, not yours." She stared at him, her breath catching for a moment. No one had defended her like that recently. Everyone else repeated the same thing: work harder, push more, ignore the stress. But Keanu didn't tell her to hide her pain. He told her she deserved better. That simple truth brought tears to her eyes again. She whispered, "You always know exactly what to say." He smiled softly. "Maybe it's because I see you clearly." She lowered her gaze, feeling a warmth rise inside her chest that she had not felt in years. But before she could say anything, something unexpected happened. The alley lights flickered again, this time more violently. A sudden loud pop echoed from the electrical box near the wall. Sandra jumped in fear, and Keanu immediately stood up, stepping in front of her protectively. A spark flew from the box, sending a small burst of light into the air. Sandra held her breath, panic rising again. She had already been shaken tonight, and this sudden danger pushed her nerves further. Keanu raised a hand calmly to reassure her. "It's okay. It's just a malfunction. Stay behind me." The lights dimmed and then went out completely, leaving the alley in darkness except for the soft glow from a distant street lamp. Sandra's heart raced. "Keanu, what if someone comes? What if people see us like this?" Her fear was raw and immediate. Darkness reminded her of pressure, uncertainty, and vulnerability. But Keanu stayed still, steady as stone. "You're safe," he said in a quiet voice. "I'm right here." She felt her breathing slow slightly. Even in the darkness, his calm presence felt like a guiding light. He turned his head, scanning the alley. "There's no one here, nothing to worry about." She nodded nervously. "I'm sorry, I get scared easily lately." Keanu sat beside her again. "You don't have to apologize for being human." She exhaled shakily. Darkness had always made her thoughts louder. Tonight, it felt heavier because of her fragile state. Keanu slowly took out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The soft white light filled the area around them, creating a small, safe circle in the alley. "See," he said gently, "we're okay." Sandra felt relief wash over her. The light made everything feel familiar again. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu looked at her carefully. "Tell me what else is weighing on your heart." She hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should share everything, but if there was anyone who would understand, it was him. Finally, she spoke softly. "It's not just the director or the pressure. I've been feeling this pain for a long time. I wake up every day with anxiety. I overthink every little detail. I feel like I'm losing pieces of myself. Keanu listened with complete focus. His expression did not change, but his eyes showed deep concern. Sometimes, she continued, I feel like I'm disappearing, like people only see the actress, not the real me, and I don't know how to bring myself back. Her voice cracked in the middle. The darkness around them added weight to her confession. Keanu nodded slowly. You're not disappearing, you're overwhelmed, there's a difference. She took a slow breath. But what if I can't handle this anymore? What if the world expects more than I can give? Then you adjust, he said softly, not the world. She looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? Sometimes you have to step back to protect your heart. Sometimes you have to slow down, even if everyone around you is running. Sandra bit her lip. But if I slow down, people will think I'm weak. Only people who don't understand strength, he replied. True strength is choosing to heal even when others expect you to keep going. She felt another tear slide down her cheek. She wondered how someone could hold so much calmness inside them. Keanu's presence felt like an anchor in a violent storm. As the flashlight continued to glow softly, Sandra whispered, Keanu, I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come tonight. You would have survived, he said gently, because you're stronger than you see. She shook her head. Maybe, but it would have hurt much more. Keanu paused for a moment, then spoke in a soft but steady voice. Sandra, listen to me carefully. Your worth is not measured by how much you carry, and you don't have to face everything alone. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever if you don't want to. His words broke something inside her in a gentle way. She felt her heart release a little more pain. She felt seen, she felt understood, she felt valued. The darkness around them suddenly did not feel frightening anymore. She whispered, Why do you care this much? Keanu looked at her with a calm expression. Because everyone deserves someone who listens, and because you have always been generous with your heart, it's time someone did the same for you. Sandra felt her breath shake. She looked down to hide the emotion in her face. Keanu slowly placed his jacket around her again, making sure she was warm. Let's walk a little, he suggested gently. The air might help you breathe easier. She nodded softly. They stood up and began walking through the quiet alley. The moonlight followed them, and the city sounds slowly faded behind. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, Sandra did not feel like she was walking alone. They walked slowly through the quiet street, the night stretching softly around them. Sandra felt the cold air touch her cheeks, but Keanu's jacket kept her warm. Each step felt lighter than the one before, as if with every breath she released a little more of the pain she had carried for so long. The city felt peaceful at this hour, almost like it was giving her permission to pause, to reset, to simply exist without the pressure of being perfect. Keanu walked beside her, matching her pace. He didn't speak unless she did. He let her choose the rhythm. He let her choose the silence. It was the kind of respect she rarely received, the kind that made her heart soften in ways she didn't expect. After a few minutes, Sandra sighed softly. I don't know why everything feels so heavy. I used to love my work. I used to wake up excited. Now I wake up with fear. Keanu nodded gently. Pain changes how the world feels, but it never erases who you are. She looked down. I feel like I'm losing the part of me that used to shine. You're not losing it, he said. You're tired, rest will bring it back. They reached a small bridge overlooking a quiet street below. Soft lights reflected on the pavement, creating a calm glow. Sandra leaned on the railing and let the silence settle again. She could hear distant sounds, but everything close to her felt still. She whispered, I felt like giving up today, not on my career, but on the fight inside me. I felt like I couldn't take one more bad moment. Keanu stood close, but not too close. You reached your limit, and that's why you needed a break tonight. She nodded slowly, and you came at the right moment. Maybe life knew you needed someone to catch you, he said. Sandra felt her heart shake. I don't want to break again tomorrow. Then don't face tomorrow alone, Keanu replied softly. You said you're tired, let someone stand with you. She turned to him, a question in her eyes. But who would stand with me? Keanu smiled gently. I'm standing here right now. His words were simple, but they reached deep inside her. She felt a warmth in her chest she thought she had lost forever. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that night, she let herself truly breathe. Then suddenly her phone rang again. The sound made her jump. She looked at the screen. It was the director. Fear returned instantly. "I can't answer," she whispered. "I'm not ready." Keanu shook his head. "You don't have to, not tonight." She looked at the phone trembling in her hand. This time her fear didn't control her. She pressed silence and exhaled slowly. Keanu said gently, "That was strength." She blinked, surprised, just ignoring a call. "No," he said, "choosing your peace." They continued walking and reached a small open area with a few empty benches. Sandra sat down, tired but calmer. Keanu sat beside her, giving her space to settle again. After a quiet moment, Sandra said softly, "I think I forgot what peace feels like. Tonight reminded me." Keanu smiled. "Peace doesn't need big moments. Sometimes it's just sitting with someone who understands." She looked at him, eyes slightly glossy. "Thank you for being here. You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to," he replied. She breathed out slowly. "You made this night feel safe, special." "You needed it," he said. Her voice softened even more. "I did." The wind blew gently, carrying the soft smell of night air. Sandra felt her heart steady itself in a way she hadn't felt in months. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt unbeatable. For the first time in a long time, she believed she could face tomorrow. And that belief came from a simple truth. Someone cared enough to stay. The early signs of dawn touched the sky, a soft pale blue forming behind the dark clouds. Sandra and Keanu sat quietly on the bench, the silence between them calm and gentle. The night had been long, heavy, and filled with emotions Sandra had hidden for months. Now, as the world slowly prepared to wake up, she felt something inside her shift. A quiet strength was returning, not loudly, but slowly, like a warm sunrise spreading across a cold horizon. Sandra took a deep breath and whispered, "I don't know how to explain what tonight meant to me. I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect you." Keanu looked at her with a soft expression. "You didn't need to expect anything. You just needed someone to sit with you in the dark." She nodded, her eyes warming again. "I thought I had to handle everything alone. I thought showing weakness meant people would think less of me." Keanu shook his head. "Weakness is not what you showed. You showed honesty, and honesty takes more courage than pretending." The sky brightened a little more. Birds began to make quiet sounds in the distance. Sandra felt her heart settling into a steady rhythm. "I was scared tonight," she admitted. "Scared of losing myself, scared of failing, scared of what tomorrow might look like." "Fear doesn't define you," Keanu said softly. "How you rise after fear, that defines who you are." Sandra looked at him with gentle eyes. "And how do I rise?" Keanu smiled, warm and reassuring. "One step at a time, one breath at a time, and with the right people by your side." She glanced down at her hands, then whispered, "And do I still have someone by my side?" "You do," Keanu replied without hesitation. His voice carried certainty, not as a promise but as a truth, the kind of truth that soothed her heart and calmed her thoughts. She smiled softly. "I don't want to run away anymore. I don't want to hide my feelings. I want to face tomorrow, but I want to face it calmly." "Then let tonight be your reset," Keanu said gently. "Let it remind you that you are human and you deserve peace." Sandra breathed slowly. The fear that once felt like a giant storm now felt like a passing cloud. Everything still mattered, but nothing felt impossible anymore. After a moment, Sandra said, "I think I should talk to my director tomorrow, not out of fear, but with clarity. I should tell him what I've been going through." Keanu nodded approvingly. "Communication changes things. Honesty helps people understand your pain." "But what if he doesn't understand?" she asked quietly. "Then he doesn't deserve to measure your worth," Keanu replied. Sandra felt a soft warmth inside her chest. She hadn't heard words that comforting in a long time. The morning breeze touched their faces, gentle and cool. Sandra looked around the empty street and smiled weakly. "This place feels different now, quiet in a good way." "Because you're calmer inside," Keanu said. She nodded, "I really am." Keanu stood up slowly and offered his hand to her. "Come on, let's walk a little. The world is waking up." She took his hand, feeling steady as she stood. They walked together slowly, the sky brightening above them. For the first time in days, Sandra did not feel the pressure of the world on her shoulders. She felt supported. She felt seen. She felt understood. After a few steps, Sandra let out a tiny laugh. "You know," she said, "I still can't believe you skipped your meeting." Keanu smiled gently. It was an important meeting, but you were more important tonight. Her steps slowed and her breath caught for a moment. She looked at him, emotion filling her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Friends show up when it matters." She nodded, but her heart knew it meant more than that. It wasn't just someone showing up. It was someone noticing her pain before she even said a word. Someone giving her the calm she couldn't find alone. Someone choosing kindness without expectation. They reached a small crosswalk. Sandra stopped and turned toward him, her voice soft and filled with truth. "Keanu tonight saved me." He looked at her gently. "Number tonight reminded you of your strength. I just sat beside you while you found it." She felt her eyes warm again, but this time the tears were soft, grateful, healing. The sun finally broke through the clouds, sending a warm, golden glow across the street. Sandra watched the light and felt hope rise inside her. "I think I can face everything now," she whispered. "You can," Keanu said. "And if you ever feel like this again, don't hide. Call me, I'll come." She smiled, touched deeply. "I will." They continued walking until they reached the point where their paths separated. Sandra stopped and looked at him with quiet admiration. "You made this night special," she said. "You made me feel human again." Keanu smiled softly. "You never stopped being human, you just needed a break." She nodded slowly. "And you gave it to me." He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Take care of yourself, rest today, tomorrow will be better." Sandra held his gaze, her heart full. "Good night, Keanu." "Good night, Sandra," he replied gently. She walked away slowly, feeling stronger with each step. She didn't look back because she didn't need to. His kindness followed her like a quiet light. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope instead of fear. She felt courage instead of pressure. She felt comfort instead of loneliness. That simple coffee session, that unexpected night, had given her something priceless. A reminder that kindness changes everything.